Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, welcome to you, and The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar, welcome to you as well, Pippa. Lots to talk about, obviously, tonight. So let's check out the front pages then, as ever. Kicking off with the Tory tensions as Hunt and Sunak wrestle over crunch budget. That's the headline for that paper. The Guardian carries a warning from health professionals that NHS funding faces the biggest cuts in real terms since the 1970s. The Times is reporting there's division in the Conservative Party for plans of a new definition of extremism. France must do more with our millions to stop small boats, reads the Daily Express, with an interview with the former Home Secretary, Dame Priti Patel. The Daily Mail reports there's outrage of the Church of England's plans to pay reparations for its historic links to slavery. The Metro has a story about the housing crisis, reporting MPs have been told the deaths of 55 children and babies have been linked to inadequate conditions in temporary accommodation. On its front page, the Financial Times reports Apple has been fined more than €1.8 billion by Brussels for stifling competition from rival music streaming services. The Sun interviews the Princess of Wales's uncle, Gary Goldsmith, where he criticises Prince Harry. And Bigfoot lives in Torquay, declares the Daily Star. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. Let's head straight to Jack and Pippa. Budget, let's kick off with that, shall we? What is the music? What do we know? Starting with the wrestling. Again, I'm sure there was a wrestling headline last week. But anyway, Pippa, where are we at?
So we're expecting the budget's going to be on Wednesday, and it is potentially the last big fiscal event before the next general election, even if the general election is in the autumn. It depends, of course, on the timing of it. So there's a lot of pressure on Rishi Sunak to use this opportunity to get his party out of the doldrums. We had yet another poll today which put the Tories at a record low of 20 points, 20% in the polls, which is lower than they've been thus far. I think it was with Ipsos Mori. So this is a rare moment for them to try and close ground with Labour. And, of course, they're coming under huge pressure from the Tory right to introduce tax cuts. Tax is obviously at a record high, 70-year high, the tax burden. And there's a real feeling that if the Conservatives are going to go into an election campaign and argue that they are the tax-cutting party, they need to put their money where their mouth, or our money where their mouths are at this election. But there's not much cash available. The Chancellor has limited fiscal headroom, and then he's looking at the prospect not just of lots of tweaks here and there, but also potentially of future spending cuts to make the sums add up.
Yes, he gave an interview to the Sunday Telegraph, didn't he, in which he said he'd had the last of the OBR's forecasts, and he said the figures had gone against them. In other words, the headroom is small, so maybe managing expectations. But the idea seems to be to rob Peter to pay Paul, whatever Paul and Peter end up being, of course, both in terms of future spending on public services, but also in some fiddly bits, which he seems to want to do to raise money, which looks like tax-raising mechanisms in order to tax cuts elsewhere, which presumably the Tory right will not like. So can you make sense of what I'm saying? That'd be helpful, Jack.
Yes, it seems that Jeremy Hunt is engaging in a bit of fiscal jiggery-pokery, shall we say, and he's been sort of at his desk in number 11 for the past few days. He desperately wants to get about 2p worth of tax cuts on one of the two big revenue raiser headline rates, be it income tax or national insurance. It looking more likely potentially national insurance. To do that, with the £13 billion of headroom he's got, he had to keep about £6 billion in reserve in case things go haywire. And so what he has to do, actually, is look at much smaller taxes, potentially to raise stuff like a tax on vapes, such as targeting second homeowners, such as targeting air passenger duty, non-doms, to be able to then make the sums add up and the OBR give him a green tick when he goes for those big headline revenue raises. And it's a bit of a comms crisis, really, isn't it? Because, you can raise all these other taxes, but it's much easier to say, OK, leave these taxes to the side actually, look at this, I've cut 2p off national insurance, a further 2p to the autumn, and I think that he's hoping that people will forget the other, the Peter as such, and just focus on the big attention-seeking pool those headline rate reductions.
And, you know, the whole idea of national insurance, we've already had that. It clearly didn't land because it hasn't shifted the dial. So why bother with that again? We'll come on to the Times and the other coverage on fuel duty in a moment, because I know that's your paper's great thing. But, you know, why national insurance? Why is that beneficial?
Well, the difference is, of course, between the two is that if you're genuinely trying to target tax cuts at working people, who obviously have borne a lot of the extra costs that have arisen in recent years, but also, of course, are the engine of growth, ultimately, of the economy, then national insurance is the way to do it. And that was the conclusion that the government came to in the autumn statement when it said that, when they announced that 2% cut in NI. And all the signalling since that point, really, the moment when Jeremy Hunt went to Davos and on multiple occasions since then, has been suggesting that there's more to come on that in particular. However, there's been pressure from some around Rishi Sunak to focus on income tax cuts instead, because even though that obviously it benefits everybody, it is more expensive, but there is regarded as being a sort of a bigger political benefit. And as you say rightly, Anna, at the autumn statement, lots of Tories felt that they didn't get credit for cutting NI the amount that they did. And even if that was just the beginning, as Hunt has indicated, they need to be able to capitalise politically from whatever the announcements are in this budget. And crucially, Rishi Sunak, if you remember back to the leadership election campaign against Liz Truss that he lost, he had pledged then, if he became Prime Minister, to reduce the basic rate of income tax from 20p to 16p. So he's clearly keen on that particular cut. Is there a world where we see that 2% or even more being on that income tax cut? I think there is. Because
for workers, the great irritation has been what they call fiscal drag, is that you get a pay rise because you will have had a pay rise, hopefully, because of inflation rates, and that takes you into another tax band, the tax thresholds, and they have not budged. And that's you know, one of the great efforts, isn't it, for tax campaigners?
Yes, and that's what's really angering workers, MPs and the Tory right, because, like you said, the National Insurance 2p cut, the autumn statement, while, yes, they could say, realistically, they have put money in people's pockets, overall, the tax burden went up because of these so-called stealth taxes. However, I'm not sure we're going to see any movement of that really at the budget, just because they are too expensive and they're too valuable for the Treasury at the moment. And also, try telling somebody, oh, actually, you know, these sort of stealth taxes, these thresholds are actually going to stay the same. It's not an easy sell, is it? Whereas if you can say the headline rate of something is coming down, it's much easier to sell to the electorate. And so I think that's probably what we're going to be looking at on Wednesday.
I've got stuck, haven't I? There's loads on this list. Should we proceed? Anyway, just quickly as well, because I know it's your campaign, your paper's done a lot about this. The Times is going on the top as well. Hunt poised to freeze fuel duty in a budget boost for drivers. I mean, that's quite an expensive thing to do, let's be honest about it, isn't it? It
is. This would be the 14th year that fuel duty has been frozen, so it's not going up with inflation. We also expect Jeremy Hunt to keep in this 5p. It's meant to be temporary cut in 2022, just for a year, but it got extended last year. We expect it to be extended this year as well. While it is, you know, fairly expensive, £5 billion, which would go into the Treasury, actually it doesn't really affect the so-called OBR calculations, because it's meant to be temporary. So they assume it's going to go up every year, but because it's not, it doesn't actually eat into his headroom, exactly. But it is a win for drivers, and yes, I think a win for the Sun as well.
Yeah, it's on the front of the Financial Times as well. And then The Guardian talks about the backdrop of a lot of this, which is, you know, the public services creaking, straining, and the headline here, doctors issue a dire warning as the NHS faces its biggest budget cut in 50 years. Yeah, and, I mean, Jeremy Hunt is considering cutting billions more from public spending plans post-election to pay for some of these tax cuts that we've talked about in the budget. But economists, I think it was last week, were suggesting that could take 20% out of the budgets of what's called unprotected departments, so things like justice, home affairs, local government. The protected departments, of course, are things like defence, schools, generally the NHS workforce. But what the story we've got on the front of The Guardian suggests, these are new figures from the very respected think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and it suggests that actually there's going to be a £2 billion gap in funding for the £2 billion cut in funding for the NHS in England, which could result in things like staffing numbers
even pay and the services that the NHS provides to patients being cut just, as we go into a general election. And already, as we've seen and heard from many in the NHS, including those who are striking, feeling that the NHS is already on its knees before such a cut would even come into force.
It's a critical area, and a critical area for voters as well, isn't it? I've got the Times, and let's just show you the lead story. Tories divided over a new definition of extremism, but up the top there, Hunt poised to freeze fuel duty in a budget boost for drivers. So we'll watch and wait, obviously, for Wednesday. In the meantime, let's go to what happened today in Parliament. We always knew that Rwanda would be a rocky road for the Lords, and so it is proving. Jack.
Yes, so the Lords have inflicted 5 defeats on the government this evening, which is actually quite a lot. However, I don't think in the long run it's going to make a material difference. We always expected them to water down this Rwanda bill. These sort of 5 amendments which they've tacked on to the Safety of Rwanda bill tonight have all been in the guise of the court should be able to say that Rwanda is not a safe country. Well, that is the entire point of the bill, right? You're saying in law that Rwanda is a safe country, or the Rwanda bill should comply with domestic and international law. Well, at the moment, the government is hoping that there will be no challenges from international and domestic law. And so they're going to, until Wednesday, keep watering down this bill and then send it back to the Commons next week, where I think we can imagine all of these amendments to be stripped back out and kicked back to the Lords.
Let's just see your paper while you're talking as
yes.
well. Actually, you're making the point here, but carry on.
And don't forget that when the Commons passed this last year, lots of people on the Tory right really did hold their nose and vote for it because they said, OK, we're going to go for this, but actually we're not going to stomach any more watering down of this bill. And so if it does come back to the Commons, I think we can basically say Tory MPs are going to say absolutely no way are we taking any of these amendments. You send it back to the Lords in all your form. And actually, we've even heard Rebel peers today say, in the end, after this arm wrestle, we had the ping-pong, but the Lords will cave and give in to the elected Commons. So it delays it a little bit, but actually the substance doesn't really change.
Yes, we can't show your paper, I don't know why, but it says 40 to a boat, 300 a day, as the Lords fight the Rwanda plan. And the Metro as well, similar, 300 migrants reach the UK on a day that a child is lost. So it's still, the point is it's still a critical issue, I suppose.
It's still a very live issue, and of course, obviously, a lot of the opposition in certain seats is not just about those people coming across in small boats. It's also about where asylum seekers are housed. Often in constituencies, hundreds of miles away from the sea. James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, has talked about the Rwanda bill is only part of the solution to securing Britain's borders, as he puts it. And the Express has got an interview with Priti Patel, who was, of course, the former Home Secretary, talking about France needing to do more. This is on a day in which actually a customs partnership has been struck with France. Not much detail about it, but the suggestion is that this agreement will see Britain working more closely with France and going after the supply chains to stop the boats reaching the French coast in the first place. However, there's already holes in it. It's just France that they're dealing with. Presumably, this is actually an EU issue when it comes to supply chains, and you need to deal with other countries. And there's no proper data sharing at the moment of criminal information or additional UK police resources to work with Europol. So I think there's going to be lots of questions about actually how much this new agreement is going to do, and probably pressure for them to reach further agreements with other European countries as well.
OK. Still, got lots more to talk about. Anyway, lots more coming up in the next part of our programme, including the front page of the Daily Mail. Vicars in uproar, the paper says, over Church's £1 billion slavery reparations. We will discuss that and more after this. You are watching the press preview. With me once again, The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to the front of the Daily Mail then, shall we? Jack, why don't you kick off? Vicars in uproar is how the headline starts, so take it away.
Yeah, so this is a report which the Church of England commissioned into its slavery past and what it can do to atone for that. And originally this report suggested that £100 million would be enough to suffice to sort of pump that back into black communities, black education. However, we now see that actually £1 billion is being suggested by groups linked to anti-slavery, and the Daily Mail has gone in on a bit of a backlash to this. So they have vicars saying how it would be anti-Christian, it would spell the death knell for the Church of England. The idea being that £1 billion would absolutely cripple the coffers of the Church of England, as rich as it may be. £1 billion seems an awful lot, and they have vicars here tonight saying how it would be anti-Christian and suggested it was motivated by a death wish for the Church of England. They do have other recommendations in this report, for example, apologising for the Church of England's denial that that God was made in the image of black people, which seemed to be a lot easier to implement. The question now is whether or not the Archbishop of Canterbury goes along with this and coughs up that £1 billion.
And the indications are, well, I don't know, he was quite committed to be in the House of Lords on the Rwanda bill, I suppose, wasn't it? But anyway, what's the suggestion then?
The indications are that they view this as the beginning of a process and that they will ramp up the amount of money available. I mean, the Mail and others suggest that, you know, parishioners are going to be less likely to put their hands in their pockets and support local churches. But don't forget, I mean, the church is an investment arm worth 10 billion quid. It's not poor. There are other ways of getting this funding beyond asking people at a local level to support. And I think the intention is to ask wealthy families and benefactors if they would be prepared to be willing to donate to help the church pay for this fund, which it believes is essential because it has past links to slavery. It benefited financially over the years from slavery. And this group, which was led by descendants of enslaved Africans, has decided that this would be one of the best ways for it to start to address some of those historic links. The Archbishop of Canterbury, of course, apologised for the links in 2022, and this is just the latest step on this process that the Church is going through. OK,
we'll see what happens with that. In the meantime, let's go to The Sun. A celebrity Big Brother exclusive. Princess Kate's uncle, Gary Goldsmith, has hit out at Prince Harry. Anyway, the timing of this is interesting, isn't it, for the Prince and Princess of Wales, given what they are, you know, going through as a family right now? Yeah, very chaotic and probably quite upsetting time for the royal family. So the uncle's gone in the Celebrity Big Brother house. I suppose I should... Tonight, yes. Kate Middleton's uncle, Gary Goldsmith, has entered the Big Brother house. And I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, my God, this is going to be the worst time possible because he could lift the lid on Kate and Will's life, he could spill some secrets. However, it seems that rather than doing that at all, he's called her absolutely perfect. He's launched an absolute drive-by on Harry and Meghan Markle, saying they're all on the make, saying they're only out for themselves, hitting out at their sort of cash-raising ventures. And so, actually, it seems that he's going to be turning his fire on Harry rather than Kate. OK. Jack and Pippa, lovely to see you both. Thank you. See you for the 11, of course. Here's the weather, though, now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, turning drier and more settled this week and milder, but there will be a chilly but largely frost-free start tomorrow with fog patches through central and southern parts, rain near the east coast and blustery showers over Ireland and the Channel. Eastern Britain will see the early rain largely clearing through the morning, perhaps lingering over north-east Scotland and East Anglia, while the north of Ireland and Northern Ireland will see showery rain clearing through. Most places then look fine, but expect a few showers, mainly in the south and the northwest. Touch milder, less windy in the southwest.